From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Christine, released in 1983, starring Keith Gordon, John Stockwell, and Alexandra Paul, directed by John Carpenter. The synopsis is, a murderous sentient car possesses a boy and terrorizes his enemies. The story. Believe it or not, the concept of killer or possessed vehicles is not a novel idea and has been used as the topic for many books, films, and TV episodes. In fact, I feel as if the film has a lot of themes from the movie The Car, released in 1977, of being a very unique car that is pure evil and morbidly vengeful. However, I do believe that this was purely accidental. American author Stephen King first came up with the short story Trucks in 1973 that eventually turned into a movie written and directed by him called Maximum Overdrive in 1986. What a movie! But in 1982, he had another story concept about a haunted car that he didn't even get published before Hollywood grabbed the rights to make it into a film. Christine. King chose the name Christine while he was filming Creepshow in Pittsburgh with George and Christine Romero. He also chose to have the car as a 1958 Plymouth Fury because it was what he called a forgotten car. A 1958 Plymouth Fury turns up in a few other of King's novels. It, 11/22/63, and The Stand. John Carpenter was dancing around the possibility of adapting another Stephen King novel, Firestarter, that was eventually released in 1984 and directed by Mark L. Lester. Instead, he struck a deal to direct Christine. Bill Phillips was brought in to write the screenplay after at first laughing at the concept, but then changing his mind halfway through the reading of the book. The idea of a possessed sentient car is a hilarious and odd concept, but the interpersonal relationships between the human characters is really what makes the story intriguing in both the movie and the book. So just to give you a backstory of one of the biggest changes from the book to screen was that in the book, Christine was an average car that was owned by a man by the name of Roland LeBay. He sold the car to Arnie Cunningham and died soon after. Roland's spirit possessed both the car and Arnie, using the two to kill anyone who appears to be an enemy. On the other hand, in the film, it makes it very clear from the very beginning that Christine is a sentient and was born, quote unquote, bad to the bone, as we hear the song by George Thorogood and the Destroyers playing in the background. There is no explanation, but she is just the way she is and looking for an owner that will love her. I personally love both takes from the film and the book, but I do prefer the idea of Christine being the main character of her own movie. To me, that just makes more sense theatrically. In the book, Christine is a tool for LeBay's murderous intentions, and that seems to really work for the novel, where you can slowly build up the story. One thing I really appreciate about the story in the film is how there's never a dull moment because it's full of suspense for the audience, lots of little details hidden within the story. And it's interesting how characters that are not so nice can, dare I say, be surprisingly likable. The dialogue was very succinct, and even though there's a lot of exposition, it wasn't overbearing or even sometimes even noticeable in many scenes. It allowed the characters to really express their emotions and be eccentric. There was a very natural flow to it all. The pacing. At an hour and 50 minutes, it really goes by pretty fast for me. I'm not sure how it works for everyone else, but I just love this film in its totality. There's a lot of tension throughout the film that kept me interested and wondering what was going to happen next. The challenge The main challenge in the movie is the titular character, the car Christine. Oh, Christine, Christine, Christine. She is a beautiful car. I don't know how to drive. I've never owned a car. I never plan to either. But I just love old antique cars like Christine. I guess I have a love for vehicles in general, but antiques in particular are usually cars that have a history behind them, and it takes a lot of love to keep them going. In spite of being gorgeous, as I told you before, Christine is just evil right out the gate at the assembly line. This is where Christine slams her hood door on an inspector's hand, and then she proceeds to kill another inspector who accidentally lets his cigar ashes fall to her seat. Disrespecting Christine is a no-no, okay? An offense like that is punishable by death in Christine's eyes. Roland LeBay, Christine's previous owner, never actually appears in the film, but Roland's brother, George LeBay, is safekeeping Christine after her brother's death 6 weeks earlier and recounts the many deaths in the car, which includes Roland, Roland's wife, and young daughter. Of course, none of this is mentioned when Arnie Cunningham bought her. So when Arnie buys Christine, she's in pretty bad shape. And the reason for that is more revealed in the book than the film. When Roland died, she had no one to love her, and she let herself go. Isn't that kind of interesting? Once Arnie fixes her up for the first time, putting time, love, care into her, he bonds with her, and from then on she keeps healing the damages that she endures on her own. At one point, the car has been trashed by jealous bullies. He gives her a little pep talk and says, "Show me." And she proceeds to show her love for him by healing herself. It's as if she's looking pretty for him. There are a host of many antagonists in the film, but I struggle to find out where to put Arnie, because in the beginning of the film we focus on life from Arnie's perspective, and it's pretty sad. He's a sweet young boy doing the very best he can in school and does what his parents tells him to do. Unfortunately, he's facing life-threatening bullying from a repeatedly held back student by the name of Buddy Repperton and his gang of classmates. I mean, seriously, I know that teen movies often feature adults in their roles, but this guy looks like he's 30, okay? And he's like been left back at least like 27 times. And at one point, Buddy actually even pulls out a knife in the classroom. And this is terrifying. I went to school with kids like Buddy, and you pray every single day that they don't notice you. And so this kind of a movie really stuck with me when I was young and seeing this for the first time. And even now, it's just like, it just brings up such emotions. We hope it doesn't go any further. Arnie also has the misfortune of being born to parents who love him and care about him, but they don't really know how to support him. Much of his problems with his parents come from his mother, who is extremely controlling and uptight. She means well, but she only sees him as a boy for her to mold and not the man that he wants to be. He feels smothered by her, and he can't get away from her soon enough. What really pushes him over the edge is that she didn't want Arnie to park Christine in the driveway of the house, as not to tarnish her reputation. It's a simple thing, but Arnie has no recourse but to house Christine at Darnell's body shop. And in turn, this really leads to a murderous result. I mean, we're dealing with Christine here, so things were probably going to turn murderous anyway, but doing this really hurried things along. And, you know, anytime we see Arnie go home to his parents, it's a dumpster fire of screaming and yelling. It's so plain to see that they have lost his trust, and it's so easy to see why he finds solace in Christine in the first place. He says to Dennis that he finally found something that's uglier than he is, and he knows that he can fix her up. Now, to me, that statement really broke my heart, because you know that this reflects how he's been treated all his life. I just remembered having conflicting emotions while watching the film, because I really sided with Arnie a lot. As he began to become more confident and stand up for himself, I was like, yeah, that's right, Arnie, stand up for yourself. I was rooting for him at one point. There are also moments where you see him struggle with who he's turning into, and kind of the real Arnie trying to hold on to himself and hold on to his girlfriend in the movie, Lee, which is, kind of sad to watch him struggle with that. What also pushes him further off the deep end, completely off the deep end, is when the bullies sneak into Darnell's and trashes Christine in a very heartless act. I mean, if you're a car lover, this is just so hard to watch what they do to this car. It's horrific. And symbolically, the visual of seeing Christine completely destroyed represents the destruction of Arnie's innocence. The hope of doing things the way the world suggests doesn't really work for Arnie, and even says to Christine, they can't hurt us anymore. He's done playing the game like everyone else. He's ready to do something different. And so this is where he really starts to turn evil. He slowly begins to realize that the car is alive and really responding to him like a lover, while everyone around him fails him in some way or another, blatantly or subtly. Christine is the only thing he feels he can actually count on, and it becomes Arnie and Christine against the world. One of the scenes that really stands out in my mind is when Arnie faces off with his parents and they offer to buy him another car as an insult to injury. There's a very uncomfortable moment between him and his father, wherein they know, his parents know, that Arnie is gone. The man that is staying in their home is not their son. And it's terrifying. I mean, it just sends chills up and down your spine, because you're like, oh boy, that's not Arnie. And that's where it kind of takes the turn. You stop rooting for him as much, because you're like, he's gone too far. During the film, we also have the horrific circumstance of seeing Christine pick off the bullies one by one in some of the most elaborate ways that a car could do such a thing. Moochie is the first and is one of the bullies that is singled out in particular. We don't get this information in the film. It seems as if Moochie is responsible for defecating on the dashboard while the bullies trashed Christine. So his murder in the film is a special vendetta for Christine. And I didn't really know that for a long time, and now it makes sense. This time, it's personal. She's taking her revenge on Moochie for doing that thing on her dashboard. His particular murder really tells you a lot about Christine's personality. She is so determined to have her revenge at the detriment of her own body. So there's a little scene where Moochie is trapped into a corner, but she is too big to fit in there. And, she doesn't care about logistics. So she just wrecks herself in order to just get him. She's, what a character in a car. And it's quite shocking due to the fact that these bullies are so rotten When Arnie hears of their demise, he's totally unfazed, leading the audience to speculate if he was the driver during these murders. And it's only when Christine drives back into her parking spot after one of her rampages that we realize that Arnie is not responsible for those initial deaths. We know that Christine was out for revenge, but there's a sense that she kills without provocation because she kills Darnell, and she was ready to kill Lee for slapping her car seat. If you so much as to graze this car or give her a dirty look, she will run you over. I mean, it's murder, death, kill time. Christine does not play, okay? Now for the empathy. In another story structure, Arnie would have been the protagonist to overcome Christine's spell, and his feelings for his girlfriend Lee would have saved the day. But no, we're talking about Christine, written by Stephen King. And, she even kills the ones she loves. So Arnie really never had a chance. However, there is a third wheel in the story, no pun intended. Arnie's best friend Dennis is a football jock who has his pick of really any hot girl at school, but he definitely has a thing for Lee. And that's as spicy as he gets. There isn't a whole lot of depth to his character. We barely even get to see his family in the film, and I kind of appreciated that so the film could really concentrate on Arnie and Christine. He's the complete opposite of Arnie, and yet he's Arnie's best friend. At first, we're not sure how deep the friendship goes, but ultimately we know that he really cares about Arnie and really looks out for him a lot in school when it comes to confronting bullies and, kind of getting him to open up a little bit. You could say that Arnie is his kind of charity case, but it goes a lot deeper than that. He actually loves Arnie. In the book, it seems more like Dennis isn't that good of a friend because he secretly has a relationship with Lee. But I'm glad they didn't put that part in the film. And I think they filmed it, but it just didn't make the cut. You can see that there's an attraction between the two characters, but it's more like they get together to try to help Arnie. And the film doesn't lose focus. And it sets up that Dennis really dislikes Christine along with everyone else. In the film, it's just a creepy feeling he has about the car, but it seems odd because the car is actually really beautiful, especially once Arnie fixes her up. I'm along with Arnie. I just can't understand why everyone hates Christine. However, in the book, many people who get in the car think they smell a decaying body, and that would really freak a person out. I would think that would have been a great detail that could have helped explain everyone's aversion to Christine in the film. After all, 3 people already died, maybe 4. Yeah, 4 people have already died inside of Christine. So that would actually make sense. But you know what? It still works for me the way it is in the film because it kind of looks like everyone's kind of jealous of how much time Arnie is spending on Christine. And he's slowly beginning to show more signs of becoming more confident and independent. Arnie doesn't need Dennis anymore or his parents. So it seems like a good kind of reason. But I think we have to give Dennis a lot of credit for really having good instincts. He genuinely is concerned for Arnie because even with his newfound confidence, there's a hint of cruelty and apathy in his language and demeanor. It's hard for him to see his friend change fundamentally for what seems like overnight. The sweet kid that he used to know is suddenly gone, and that has to be a shock to his experience. It's heartbreaking when that happens. He's really experiencing the loss of his friend. And this is when Dennis starts to connect the dots that something odd is going on and Christine is behind it all. I enjoyed the way the film uncovers Dennis's suspicions as he learns more and more about Christine's past. Dennis is quite passive with Arnie, but he gets more aggressive by the end when he and Lee concoct a plan to destroy Christine and save Arnie. They succeed in stopping Christine, possibly temporarily, but sadly they fail to save Arnie. Some things can't be helped. Some people can't be helped. And I think that's the moral of the story. The technical aspects. It's no shock that 15% of the budget was spent on procuring cars for the film. Christine is the star of the film after all, and it took 28 cars to achieve all of the stages that she appears in the film. Not all of the cars were Plymouth Furies because of how rare the car was even in the 80s. The Fury was a sub-series of the Plymouth Belvedere from 1956 to 1958. It was mainly sold as a sandstone, two-door hardtop with gold anodized aluminum trim in those days. That's why Christine is the only red car in the factory lineup in the very beginning of the film. For the purpose of the film, many of the cars that appear in the film are actually Belvederes and Savoys. Only 2 of the 28 cars were left intact after the end of filming. There were several cars set up for different duties throughout the film. They had special cars for beauty shots, and boy, was Christine beautiful. They had ones for moments when she was all run down and disheveled, ones for when she needed to be a hot rod kind of car, and stunt cars as well. Darnell's body shop, or junk pile shop, whatever you want to call it, was a pretty cool element to the story. The shop was shot in an old factory with half of the space set up to be Darnell's and the other half to be a real body shop for the production of cars used in the film. I think that's pretty cool. One of the other coolest aspects of Christine's rampages is that her windows are blacked out, making the audience wonder if Arnie was actually driving her, which I mentioned before. It also had a dual purpose to hide the stunt driver as well. What a very clever workaround. I love that. The only drawback was that the stunt drivers had to memorize their stunts because they weren't able to see through those very dark windows, especially at night. I think that all of the scenes where Christine is repairing herself were pure genius and done practically, which is a complete marvel of special effects. They achieved this by creating plastic versions of parts of the car that they wanted to film, and in other cases they used actual stunt car parts. They then attached hydraulic pumps with cables inside them, filming them as it sucked the sections into deflated forms. The footage was then reversed, making it look like the car was renewing itself. Again, pure genius. One staple of the film that I really enjoy was Christine's blaring headlights, used as a means of communication in a way. Christine is talking to us through her headlights, letting us know when she's mad or just ready to put her supernatural skills to use. They installed airplane landing lights on select cars for that dramatic effect. The cinematography was indeed a special piece to the film, as we get to see Christine in all of her glory. I also loved how the film captured the interior shots of Christine, making her look so massive and haunting inside. The minimal score was a collaboration with John Carpenter and Alan Horwath. When Christine's headlights blare, the sound is so riveting that it sounds again like Christine is talking to us in a supernatural language. A smile creeps on my face, and we know that something insane is about to go down, and it's going to blow your mind. Now to the soundtrack. The soundtrack is a mix of rock and roll music from the 50s all the way to the 80s, and it was used in a way in the film that it is Another chance for the audience to get to know what Christine is thinking. And a few of the times it's just telling you, the music is kind of describing what the other characters are doing or thinking at that moment. It's a technique that's also used for the character of Bumblebee in the Transformer movie franchise. It sort of follows the book's use of music in a way. The book uses music to describe the themes of certain segments to its readers, and I like the fact that John Carpenter incorporated that in the story. Now to the performances. Initially, the idea was to get Scott Baio to play Arnie Cunningham and Brooke Shields for Lee Cabot, since they were ridiculously famous actors that could play teens at the time. The filmmakers thought that casting unknowns would have been more of a better choice. They could spend more of the budget on special effects. John Cusack and Kevin Bacon were hopefuls for the part of Arnie, but in the end it was given to Keith Gordon, who knocked it out of the ballpark. There are so many incredible features to his performance. His body language at the start of the film is so minimized, shrunken, and meek. His eyes are like puppy dog eyes, and you feel sad for him. And then seeing his excitement for Christine in the very beginning is so adorable. He really makes Arnie incredibly likable, or at least you have a lot of empathy for him. When Arnie makes his transformation, Keith's shoulders lean back, his chin is up, and his eyes are either vacant or piercing right into your soul. It's terrifying. And one cool aspect of that transformation is that Keith worked with the costume designer to give Arnie a 1950s look. It was all done so subtly because there is a lot of 1950s inspiration in this movie, but also in the 80s as well. Keith's interaction with Christine really makes this love story believable. He said that he imagined that Christine was a real woman, and his performance during the scenes where he finds Christine completely totaled is so powerfully breathtaking, and I wished I could have reached into the screen and give him a big hug. But he still manages to play Arnie as someone who has got his back pushed against the wall and very conflicted with his emotions. I love the complexity that he put into that character. Now, I've heard some critics say that Keith may have been a little bit over the top with his performance, but I really don't think so, because it never betrayed the story. He's being taken over by Christine, and he's being driven crazy in a way, and crazy really doesn't have a top, and that's what I really enjoyed it so much. I think that his animated performance was one of the biggest highlights of the film besides Christine herself, and together as a team they made an awesome couple. There are so many amazing performances, but one in particular for me was that of Robert Prosky, who played Darnell. Robert asked the screenwriter if he could get more dialogue to round out his character on screen. He lifted right out of the book, in which Robert ran with it, playing Darnell as a hard-nosed, crotchety, and sleazy hometown businessman with a teeny tiny bit of a heart. It was just brilliant. Now my wish list. In the film, there's a concentration of scenes documenting Christine's odometer running backwards and then ends at 0. It's meant to infer that she is being reborn. I would have loved to know why and how. It's such a strange thing, and I thought maybe it might have been because of Arnie, that he was fueling her with so much love and attention that she's actually counting down and becoming younger. But even after he dies, she's still counting down, and it doesn't get to 0 until she's destroyed. I would have loved to have gotten an explanation as to why Arnie was transforming and how Christine was doing it. In the book, he's being possessed by Roland LeBay, but the film never explained that or connected the two in that capacity. I suppose that was the main disadvantage of not introducing Roland as an actual character in the film, and not just regarded as a former owner of the car. Another little detail that we didn't get from the film was that Roland's name, rearranged, is actually Arnold, which is Arnie's formal name. In Arnie's transformation, he ditches his glasses, and I really would have loved an explanation for that. Again, you know, is it Christine that's doing that? Is she able to change the physiology of her owners? What's the deal with that? I would have, you know, again, would have loved to know. I don't know if there's any connection to this, but the guy who works in the factory in Detroit in 1957 that finds the dead man in Christine's driver's seat looks just like a younger version of Darnell. And I've always wondered if that was on purpose or was it just an accident that the two actors look so much alike. Was that Darnell in his younger days? And, you know, that's just a question more than a wish. But I also wish that there was more of a reason why Darnell had to die in Christine's eyes. You know, the murder really left me feeling sad that Darnell died, and it felt a little obscure. There wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to it. And yes, he was a witness to see her drive in after her murder spree. And he was a little mean to Arnie, but I really would have appreciated a better reason as to why she felt he had to die. Now, in the book, there's a better explanation for Darnell's death because he snitches on Christine to the cops. And that would have worked in this movie too, but I guess the setup and the arrangement of the story wouldn't allow that to happen. I also wish that there was a bit more explanation about George LeBay, played by Robert Blossom. This is such an eccentric and interesting man, but he's all too happy to sell Christine to another owner, knowing that she is a murderous car. I mean, 3 people that he knows of has already died in the car. And so I get the idea that he wants to get rid of her. But what I have trouble with is that it seems as if he's a fan of Christine's. And it would have been nice to get a line or two from him saying something like, she's your problem now, or, you know, or maybe he's the ghost of Roland LeBay pretending to be his brother. That's kind of a cool idea, but I just wanted some kind of a motive for the character doing what he's doing in the film. That's all. It's just, he's one of the most intriguing characters in the film. And I loved his presence in the film as well. My enjoyment. Fans of both Stephen King and John Carpenter felt that the film didn't live up to their expectations. But the film did okay, both critically and in the box office. Over the years, Christine has gone down in history as one of the most famous cars in cinema, right alongside the DeLorean, the Ecto-1, and the Batmobile. And I have to say, when I first saw the film, it really intrigued me because it was not just a typical slasher horror film. It was more of a thriller. And it was interesting to see this relationship between Arnie and Christine that's so touching that I actually found myself relating a lot to Arnie. When I was a little nerd back in the day, I had quite a hard time adjusting to the world around me too, dealing with bullies in school and sometimes, you know, at workplaces as an adult. So luckily I never fell in love with an evil sentient car, if you know what I mean, and turned out evil like Arnie eventually does. So it's just interesting to see how movies can really take you back to a certain time in your life. And I have to totally admit that I do have my nostalgia goggles on pretty thick. But after seeing the film today, and seeing it from an adult point of view, I really had a lot more compassion for the adults and the parents and the horror that they were going through, seeing their son really pretty much vanish right in front of their eyes. I mean, they never had a chance of saving him. And I have even more compassion for Dennis, who ultimately lost his friend. That's I don't know if you've had this happen, but I've lost a lot of friends either passing away or just growing apart. And that hurts so much. And I also felt compassion for Lee, trying so hard to make sense of a very doomed relationship and it just not working out. I mean, I can really feel her pain in that situation. So, yeah, it's interesting. I can watch this film over and over and over and over again, and I still love it. The film is wildly entertaining, filled with so many great actors portraying unique and colorful characters in this tragic love story between a boy and his murderous, evil car. My rating is a 9.1. Well, movie lovers, that sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. And if you did, I've got over 100 of these kinds of videos over on my channel, so go browse in there and see more reviews from me like this. Subscribe if you haven't done so already and hit the bell icon to be the very first to be notified of my next video. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers, and off to my next review.